beautiful Friday morning, and welcome to the Old Doghouse Logistics Podcast, Episode 1. We're going to be talking about warehouse operations today, but first, I want to thank our sponsor, Bader Consulting Group. They're a bunch of great guys: Trey, Coleman, Morgan, Natalia. If you're looking to increase your brand and your marketing as well as your image, those are the guys that you need to go reach out to, because they're helping us with our intro and our outro, because they're really good at what they do. So check them out. More to follow on this, but let's get into today's episode. Morning, John.
Everybody.
How you doing, buddy?
Morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I am looking so forward to conversing with you about your passion, warehousing, distribution, and operations. That's my passion as well. It's been that way for a very long time and always will be in my heart and my soul. I still bleed it, my friend.
I think we both do, and I think anybody who's been in this industry for any length of time, once it gets in your system, you cannot get it out. So it's going to be with me for the long haul as well, pardon the pun. And I'd like to say good morning to everybody out there. Welcome to the Old Doghouse Logistics Podcast. Jeff and myself are co-hosts, and we're going to teach new dogs old tricks. And we've got a new series. We're going to go birth to death on logistics and distribution. It's going to be a lot of nuggets of wisdom out there, and a lot of things that most folks probably don't know. And we're going to be able to open that up and show you how everything kind of intertwines and interconnects with each other, and how it all has to function properly. Otherwise, the end result is not a satisfied customer. So, welcome aboard, Jeff. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I couldn't have said it better, my friend. Everything starts from a warehouse. Some people don't get that, but that's where the mechanisms of logistics turn and burn. It always starts internally, and then it goes externally. And that's why I've always said, and you've heard me say it, I don't know, a gazillion freaking times, that I work from the inside out rather than from the outside in, because warehousing is such a strategic, important part of the whole logistics operation, that when it comes to moving freight, you must understand, at least try to get to know the intricacies of the warehouse mechanisms, their disruptors, and what could be causing them, and how you can help your shippers uncover those nuggets, as you said, to help them be better than what they are. And you know what? On the warehouse side, that's actually true, where you can help the carriers understand, and we can get into that. So, John, I'll let you start off about how important is the warehouse operations to brokers and carriers out there that should know a lot more than what they do.
Well, a well-oiled warehouse operation is going to be what you're going to be looking for. I mean, it can negatively impact your carriers and brokers. You could have a lot of dwell time, a lot of detention if those processes within those four walls are not efficient and streamlined. It also impacts service. I mean, we have the hours of service out there, and drivers can only drive for so long. And if they're sitting, that clock is still ticking, and they may not get to their destination by the time they're supposed to, because we were held up at the shipper. So there's a lot of things that it starts out as a ripple, and
Right.
by the time it gets to the end of the chain, it's a tsunami. So it can be detrimental, severely detrimental.
Absolutely. So, what causes those issues? What are the primary reasons that those disruptors you're talking about a little bit. What causes them to happen?
It, it can boil down to the layout of your facility. Actually, if your items that are the fast movers are not close to your outbound doors, then the travel time is what's causing the delays in your operators going and picking those items and bringing them to the dock to be loaded onto the trailer. It could be you could be understaffed, or even an uneducated staff or an untrained staff that are causing delays and time and running time out on the carrier side of the thing. It could get down to, you could start talking more severe, like acts of God, or losing power, anything like that. We just had a major disruptor not too long ago called COVID. That really put a tailspin into supply chain. And I tell people, I said it took COVID for the rest of the world to understand what supply chain means. So literally took us a pandemic for the curtain to be pulled back on the ladies and gentlemen who work in this industry day in and day out tirelessly, and for very little thanks. So that's how big a deal it has gotten to be. So it's a bunch of minor little things, a lot of warehouse layout, and a lot of warehouse order picking, and a lot of warehouse shipping is logically common sense based.
Yes.
Like I said, you put your fast moving items as close to the shipping door as you can, and then your slower moving items go back towards the back of the warehouse. Most warehouses are laid out where one side is inbound, and then you have the racking in the middle, and then the other side is outbound. So
Sure.
you can receive and ship at the same time. It could be even your scheduling system. If you have, say you have 5 dock doors outbound and you schedule 7 trucks at the same time, well, guess what? 2 of them are going to. That's just rough math. So there's a lot of things that you can do as a shipper to make people's life easier and become that, what I like to call the shipper of choice. You hear those words thrown around a lot, especially when the balance is out of balance, right?
Sure.
So if it's if there's a lot of volume and capacity's tight, you start hearing people talk about shippers of choice, and it's one thing to talk about being a shipper of choice. It's another thing to be actually a shipper of choice.
Yes.
And that can mean, like you said, you mentioned earlier where, the carrier or the broker sits down with the shipper and said, hey, if you do X, then that would cut 2 hours of, 2 hours out of your load time, or whatever. And it's the shipper's responsibility of that to say, hey, I'm going to do that X, and I'm going to cut 2 hours out, and you're going to my shipment's going to get on the road 2 hours earlier. I'm going to make my service deadline, and I'm not going to be eating a lot of detention and cost, because carriers and brokers, they don't like to wait.
No.
And, if the tires aren't turning, they're not making any money. So, obviously keeping them rolling, and with the hours of service changes over the past few years, it's gotten even tighter, because used to be, you could count, if you were waiting at a shipper for a long period of time, you could count that as your break.
Yeah.
And now the clock just stays ticking. So it's even more critical. And I believe, I know as the companies that I work for as a shipper, that I would sit down and partner with my carriers and brokers and see what we could do to streamline it as much as possible to make it better. And then those carriers and brokers in turn, when capacity does get tight, they're going to go to the shippers who work with them, who try to make their lives easy, who try to cut out delays, who try to be efficient more than the ones who hold them up for 8 hours.
Yep.
It's just common sense. So, that's why what I try to do is be that person, be open, be willing to sit down, have constructive conversations. It's, sometimes it takes a team to solve the problem, and that team involves the shipper and the carrier or broker. So you have to be able to work hand in hand, not just moving the freight, but removing the obstacles from moving the freight.
Right. And you know what? When you were talking about that, you're talking about FMD. You're talking about forecast monthly demands and the placement of inventory, and the obsolete inventory, as you said, non-movers, et cetera, to the back. But also it has a lot with the labor allocations on a daily basis. And
Right.
the way that you're able to schedule that labor allocations, and I got a big, huge chart on that because I did that, is that it's relied on inbound inventory that's coming in, and then the worksheets per man hour as to how fast they can unload the scheduled inbound deliveries to put them in inventory, which is the middle bound part of the operation. So you've got the IB on the inbound, and then you've got the middle bound where that labor is scheduled based on your schedule of inbounds for those shipments that are coming in to make sure that it's efficient and there's a flow, because there's so many different parts of the operation in warehousing, whether it's pick, pack, kit, store, warranty, claims, etc. You have to be able to allocate that labor force in those specific areas depending upon what's coming in. So if you have a delay, as John said, a previous shipper for some reason isn't efficient, they held up a driver and the driver wasn't able to get there at their requested time because John has already allocated his labor force to certain areas within his operation because he knows what's going on. He knows how much processing has to go into warranty work. He has a ton of claims that came in, so he has to process that and get them filtered out and analyzed, etc. So he needs X amount for that. He's got 7 53-footers of replenishment stock that's coming in, and he's got the forklift drivers. He's got to find the space within the warehouse to stock all that stuff. So I mean, you're pulling from one area to compensate the other one. We're going to get into that as well because the inbound affects the middle bound, and the deficiencies in either one of those affect the outbound operations when it's not efficient and your team's not rolling the way that you planned. So it's that, right. And it comes down to the deliverables and why on-time delivery performance is so crucial to their operation, because you're holding up their operation. And the other thing too is, and we can get into that later on as well, is balanced outbound, being that sometimes you'll be labor intensive based on the ordering trends of your clients on a daily basis, where you might be heavy on a Monday, light on a Tuesday, extremely heavy on a Wednesday, nothing on a Thursday, that is, nothing on a Wednesday, and light on a Friday. So when you're trying to negotiate, especially on the dedicated side of the business, you want to try to balance that flow of goods out throughout the week. And that comes down to communication with your key stakeholders by collaborating your operations with them. And if they're willing to adjust their receivables in order to help you be more efficient, therefore their on-time delivery performance is also going to be increased tenfold, because now instead of having those peaks and valleys throughout, now you've got that little bounce, and you've got those dedicated carriers that are bumping your door, and they know that the fulfillment on the outbound is going to happen every day at 4 p.m., that they'll have a full truckload. Otherwise, that's not cost efficient when you're on the negotiation side, because again, you're dealing with the carriers that are coming inbound or their reps. When you're negotiating those rates, that they're going to be held up. It's the unknown for them. They don't know how much they're going to have. Right. Failure to communicate affects cost of goods being sold, the rate on what you're trying to move, etc. So there's so many different things involved in that.
Yeah, and Jeff, I've got a very good real life example of that, talking about balance. Right. My previous job, we were shipping to a major retailer, and a major global retailer, but we were just shipping domestic. And the way they had their requested delivery dates, it basically um, unbalanced the week from a labor's perspective.
Right.
So everything would have to ship, it'd be like Monday was kind of busy, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday were dead, and
Yep.
Friday was just all hell breaking loose. So we started looking at it, and I believe that as a logistics manager or trans manager or whatever you want to call yourself, you have to think outside the box. You have to figure out solutions that may or may not be traditional. Maybe nobody's thought of them in the organization before. So what we did, and we were moving, 40 to 60 loads on Friday in
Yep.
a 8 or 10 hour shift, and didn't have the capacity to do that. So what we did was we switched from over the road carriers to intermodal carriers, and did a mode conversion, which obviously saved transportation dollars. We
Sure.
back we backed the ship days up back into the week because we needed a little more transit time for the intermodal to deliver versus over the road. We wound up balancing the warehouse's work schedule so they were getting those loads Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they could ship them out. And then, of course, Friday came down from 40 to 60 to probably, closer to 10 to 20. So it balanced it across the whole thing. And, everybody won, because the DC had their labor balanced and they could be more efficient. We had capacity because all the intermodal carrier had to do was take it to the railhead and drop it off. So if capacity got tight in over the road, we were still swinging boxes. We didn't hold the carrier up because all they did was come in and do drop and hooks. They kept a pool of intermodal containers there. We took
Yep.
care of the customer. We still met their requested delivery date, and we saved money on the transportation budget. So that's a real life example of something I actually did.
Yeah, and what's really interesting when you're talking about that, and there's I'm trying to bring this up so people have a better understanding about the complexity. And I kept this. I'm gonna share this and chat a little bit about that, because I've always talked about complexity in the logistics business and how I excelled and loved it and still dabble in it. So I'm just going to share this thing talking about balanced outbound. All right, let's see. Here we go. So this here is from Ford Motor Company from a long time ago, and this is a daily outbound that I had to deal with, and these are all different routes that we had to create on a milk run, multi-stop, multi-dealership, which was like Mazda, Volvo, Jaguar, etc., Lincoln Mercury. And so that you understand, and I'm still scrolling through this, okay? This is one day. This is absolutely one day of outbound on 48 different routes that we ran. And this was all multi-stop, tons, talking thousands of outbound, where I had to balance all this inventory that were going out for VOR vehicle off the road, interim shipments, which was your LTL, and stock orders, which was your daily stock outbound. And how critical it is to the cost effectiveness when you're talking about helping a warehouse out to identify the hidden bank opportunities that I talk about, that enables them to build a better process as far as adjusting it to where they can reduce their transportation cost by understanding the ordering trends and digging into that, which I did on the network redesign and distribution out of each PDC, and we named them, etc. But this is like the most complex thing, and this was all manual. All this stuff was manual compared to the tools that we have today, which is really easy. But there's, and we talked about that as well, about the practical applications and building the proper tools that enables warehouse efficiency to streamline what they're doing to create more in less time, enabling to save on their bottom line and find those dollars that they can bring to their bottom line. So there's so much involved in this, John, that, some people just fail to recognize that, there's much more to logistics than moving freight. There's so much more to it, John, that, more education and knowledge that you gain on a individual. Let's just say you were prospecting, you want to know who John was and who he worked for, his background, what they do, what they don't do, and what you can do as a service provider to add that value add to his operations, where he would rely as much as on you as you would rely on him to build those long-term business relationships. So am I off on this? Or?
No, not at all. Not at all. You're spot on. Spot
Yes.
on. Yeah, those you got to have that partnership, and that's another term that gets thrown around in the industry when things are out of balance. But you got to have that partnership. You got to be creative. Think outside that box, and sometimes it's just sitting down with your carrier or your broker, and just kind of what I call spitballing or brainstorming, and trying to think, what can we do to make this better, and it may be something that's just unorthodox.
Right.
I say if you're not at least a little unorthodox in this industry, you're doing it wrong. So so sometimes you like I said, you have to think, you don't think the way it's always been,
No.
It's you have to come up with something different and adjust and constantly monitor and massage and to your point, I mean, you've got to be able, especially in warehouse operations, you got to be able to pivot really quickly, because there's a lot of variables to you. You mentioned several of them during our conversation. There's a lot of variables out there that A, you can't control, and B, you don't know when they're going to show up at your doorstep. So you've got to be able to think fast and don't let it get you caught flat-footed, and be able to pivot and utilize your assets in any area that you need it in. You had mentioned what happens if the inbound shows up late because they held the driver too long at the vendor, and you're sitting here and you got all this staff scheduled in to unload those trucks, and they're not there. Well, you need to move those staff into other areas of your operation that are definitely needing some help. Maybe it's outbound. Maybe you have a heavy outbound day like you just showed us.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to pivot, and you got to be really, really flexible and think fast on your feet, because if you don't, you're going to be just putting that ripple effect into the pond, just like I mentioned earlier, and you're going to be contributing to it, and it will be a tsunami by the time it gets to the end.
Oh yeah, and that's a huge understatement, for sure. Like when, again, the spot market is one thing when you're just hit or miss and moving, but when you get into dedicated, there's so much more involved. And like I said before, let's just say, John, that you were an enterprise shipper. The way that I would want to do, and what's missing in the industry, is listening with intent. Intent is a huge word that should be understood, and the reason why you should listen with intent to understand the operations and the intricacies of a specific operation. And the way that you do that is that once you have that engagement and you have an understanding to possibly work further, hey, John, listen, you know what? I have a carrier pool. I have some reps that I'd love to bring in. Can we have a round table and just talk about your operations so that everybody is on the same page? Because personally, the way you make a warehouse operate at its most efficiency is having that mutual understanding and that ramp up. Absolutely. Having that operational ramp up of what is going to happen and when and how. And then when you talk about new products that are coming in, share that with your carriers. There's so much different things that go on with that share and that knowledge base, because one, And we're going to talk about that as well as we really start digging into the weeds. It is the claims cost per product dollar value, because if you've got mixed products on that trailer, when you're looking at the liability and cargo, cost and all this kind of stuff for insurance purposes, you need to know that adjustment. So if a claim happens, the dollar value on each level when that claim is put in, that you're going to get paid X amount for that specific product, not just one cost dollar. And that's huge. That's huge on saving a lot of cost. People don't do that, or they understand that it's complex, but it really needs to happen. If you're really going to build a long-term business relationship, you've got to have that ramp up process. You've got to have that collaborative effort made on all three parties. Whether you're going directly to an asset and having them in house, or you're using a carriers brought to you by a broker. You have that broker come in. You have the carriers come in with the shipper sitting there. You're not talking rates. Rates are irrelevant. You're talking about the operation and uncovering best practices, because it does happen. Sometimes a lot of carriers have better practices than others. And once that's identified, a lot of other carriers, especially carrier reps, will take that under consideration and saying, hey, you know what? That's a really good point. I never thought about that. Thanks. We're gonna adapt that. And things just start rolling. And talking about your own fuel surcharge scale, your own accessorial things. So much things that can be done internally within the warehouse operations and its functions, that you can drive costs down because everybody is on the same page. So there's less time spent auditing bills. I mean, there's so many different things, John.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of things you can do. I tell people, obviously you have to bid freight from time to time. You get new lanes and this, that, and the other. But basically, if you're consistently bidding your freight numerous times throughout a given period, it's a short-term solution to a long-term problem.
Right.
So, you can drive to your point. You can drive labor cost out. You can drive carrier cost out, broker cost out, and you don't have to drive the rates through the floor or bid every 6 weeks. And carriers and brokers. They might have been born at night, but they weren't born last night. So
no.
So if you're bidding every 6 weeks or every 2 months or whatever, they get wise to that, and they're going to stop doing business with you. So you need to figure out a way to maintain a sustainable rate per mile that the carrier can live with, you can live with, and then just start driving costs out of your supply chain. And the other piece I wanted to add on to what you were talking about earlier about ramping up. This industry is a constant, continuous improvement exercise.
Absolutely.
It will be, you can drive all the slop out of it you want, and there will still be opportunity for you to take a look at something. And to your point, if you build those long-term relationships with your carriers and your brokers and your shippers, then you guys sit down and you can brainstorm. And honestly, just me speaking for myself, that's part of the fun part of this industry, is pulling those layers of that onion back and saying, okay, what's making it stink, number one, and number two, how do we keep it from stinking? So it's a very creative process. And if you get in with a group of people, and it's not just yourself, I mean, I like doing it on my own, but I also like doing it with teams, because you get all those different perspectives.
Or you want that.
And you want that because it's just like they say, 2 heads is better than 1. Well, 5's going to beat 2, 10's going to be, you understand my point.
Yeah, it's not a gang up. And to your point, you want to bring in S&OP in that sit down with your carriers, because sales and operations teams are critical to negotiations.
Absolutely.
And it's not just you as a supply chain manager or logistics manager or traffic manager. You need to pull in all those key stakeholders, because they're a huge part of the operation and how you are going to be better as a service provider by understanding how each entity within that operation works. And then you find out their deficiencies and how you as service provider can give them that value add by taking out that extra workload to make their job easier. Because guess what, guys? That's what you're hired to do as a service provider. It's not just moving freight. And now I have a really important question for you, John. Really important. And I can answer this. Should you charge carriers for being late?
There's a lot of schools of thought on that. I know there's a lot of shippers out there that do.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if the carrier is late and it's controllable, then they're impacting their shipper's labor cost on the unload or the load.
Which affects the negotiation and the cost, right?
Yep.
Typically, the negotiations on what they're willing to pay you to move their freight. If it's a higher cost on their end, they're going to chisel you down to get the cheapest rate possible because they know they're going to be spending that on the back room with their SG&A costs because of your inefficiencies of banging their dock at a specific time as part of the requirement.
What I would say, and I'm speaking solely for myself, and this is just my personal preference. I tend to separate rates and service. I know they go hand in hand. I know they impact each other. But I try to look at them differently. If I have a carrier and we are working at a negotiated rate, more than likely I'm not going to fine them for being late. But if they're consistently late, if it's a chronic behavior, I'm just going to replace them.
Or you're going to have probably a conversation with them, or when it comes to the second round of negotiations, you're going to bring that up and use it against them,
yes, absolutely.
and justify the reason why
absolutely
you're not going to take that increase on that rate. So as a service provider, you've got to turn those pages around and not give the shipper that opportunity by hitting all marks. I mean, there's exceptions to the rule. It's called an act of God, which you, John, myself, and nobody else, unless you consider yourself God, has control over. And those have to be ironed out in the beginning of the negotiations. So, because some people shippers don't understand that, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And you have to get on that same page by saying, okay, I understand your point, John, but listen, if this happens and there's an accident, that's out of my control and I'm late, I don't want to be binged for that or being put against my on-time delivery performance because an act of someone else that caused me to be late. But let me tell you, and I did this when I was a shipper. If one of my carriers or my fleet was late, I would drill down to the power unit and I would drill into their PMs and when it was last done and why was it happening over and over again. I have ways of drilling into that kind of stuff that I know a lot of other people don't know this kind of stuff, but I will get damn answers to the problems that caused this problem with my shipper and my client. Because
I look at it like this, Jeff. Everybody has a bad week or a bad day. Sure. And then you factor in acts of God, to your point, you factor in, traffic accidents. You've got two ways, in my personal opinion, of grading on-time performance. You can either go with a gross on-time performance where everything is factored in, weather, accidents, but you take your bar is set lower because those things are going to factor in. So in other words, and I'm throwing numbers here. Let's say instead of 98% on time, if you do gross on time, maybe it's 95, maybe it's 94. Or, and this is one I prefer better, is do a net on time delivery, controllable versus uncontrollable.
Yeah.
To your point, when you have those initial discussions with your carrier broker, you say, here's the bar, and this is what, these are the factors that are uncontrollable and you will not be deemed for, and these are the factors that are controllable and you will be deemed for. And I always put truck breakdowns as controllable.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
if you're not PMing your equipment, the likelihood of that truck breaking down increases significantly. And all you got to do is PM the equipment. Now, traffic accidents, no, I wouldn't count them against them. Acts of God, tornadoes,
Weather-related
wildfires, snow, ice, earthquakes, and believe me, I've seen a lot of this stuff already. Tornadoes.
Me too. Even with the intermodal, intermodal runs by HOS as well. So, sometimes they run out of time, or the couplers get frozen, or the brakes freeze up. There's so many times when you start getting up in the Highlands and you're starting to get into Montanas and the Wyomings and, the frozen tundra. There's a reason why they call it that. Things do happen. So, that's why you have to look at those what if scenarios, to your point.
Yeah, those mountain passes get really rough during the winter. I personally prefer net on time, a net on time metric, because I want to know, to me, if it's gross, it's kind of nebulous. It's, okay, they're at 95. Could they be better? What factored into it? It's kind of like I'm the same way with freight rates. I want to grocery list all the items. I want to know what my fuel is. I want to know what my lumper charge was. I want to know you had X hours of detention. I want them line item out because I want to see every one of them. Now you have some folks out there who like playing numbers games. If the logistics manager is graded on his freight rates, he may have a more generous fuel table or a more generous accessorial table to lower his line haul rate cost. And the opposite holds true. If the logistics manager is graded on, keeping fuel costs down, he may have a very, what I call a stingy fuel surcharge table. Mm-hmm. And all that gets kind of rolled back up into the line haul rates because there's no free lunch out here, people.
Oh, no, but there's offsets.
Everybody is going to get their money one way or the other. It just boils down to a numbers game. And I want to see every cost in its purest form, because that's how you make good analytical decisions.
I could not agree with you further on that, because that's exactly what I did and how I reduced costs, because I wanted to know each bucket where my cost was being spent, and then where should my laser focus be on that. Those are the controllable things. Those are the identifiers that you should be revisiting more often than anything else in your operation. And you're talking about metrics. I want to pull up some of the quick metrics that I put together and have used over the years. There's some more on this, but just to give everybody kind of an idea out there in our audience, what type of metrics that a lot of warehouses uses. So let me just bring that up in a second here. Here we go. So part of the transportation metrics, you got the billing accuracy, you've got carbon footprint, claims, dock congestion, equipment condition, flexibility, network stability, on-time delivery, on-time in full, chargeback dollars, on-time pickup, out-of-network shipments, safety, security, tracking, trailer utilization, vendor compliance. On the tracking carrier performance, you have on-time pickup, on-time delivery, claims-free percentage, EDI compliance, billing accuracy, tender acceptance, quarterly customer satisfaction surveys, big for me. Then those nice warehouse metrics, average warehouse capacity used, shipment complete per customer order, POI is perfect order index, ordering, picking accuracy, percent of orders with on-time delivery, peak warehouse capacity used, inventory turns, all great examples of the things that help move the mechanisms of logistics and where the focus point should be on any one of those. There are a few more, but I just jotted these things down. I don't know. Is this something that you use, John, or some of it?
Yeah. We use I've used KPIs and metrics everywhere I've worked.
Yeah.
That's really the only way you can manage your supply chain effectively. It's kind of
Yes.
like a heads up display on an airplane.
Yeah.
At least you know if you're headed into the mountain or not. So you know to pull up or adjust this or adjust that. But yeah, we do KPIs. I've done order accuracy, which falls into your perfect order index.
Yep.
Uh, did order fill rate, um, on time delivery. I think the claims metric we used, and I'm sure it's evolved since then, but it was claims as a percentage of sales. Uh,
Absolutely.
Obviously, you want to keep that low. And that those types of things I can take 5 minutes and glance at and tell if I'm flying straight and true, or if I'm nosediving, or if I'm somewhere I don't need to be. And
Yeah. And
and
you know what? To your point, and I did leave that out, but was claims costs per product dollar or something like that. But you know what? That's an identifier. So that tells me that we should be looking into that collectively as what's causing those claims on that specific product all the time. Now, I used to do product reengineering, product packaging reengineering, which had a lot to do with it. And one of the things, and a quick story, it's fun, but when I was with Jaguar, we shipped windshields, and we shipped a ton of windshields to the Bible Belt in Arizona when they had giant storms and they had hailstorms, and these dealerships would have all these Jaguar windshields that were smashed. So we had to figure out how we're going to ship them out. So we would ship them out in a big Gaylord box, 6 foot long by 20 inches by 20 inches. And when they got to the consignee or the dealership, you could put everything in about a 4 by 4 inch cube because they were just shattered all over the place. Right?
right.
So I had to figure out how I'm going to do this. So I worked with some corrugated companies, well known, and we created inserts and better packaging and how I tested it out. And Mr. Dale, who was the president of Jaguar Cars at the time, thought I was out of my freaking mind. But I would go to the walkway over the main thing, and I would take a box full of windshields and I would throw it from the upper deck onto the bottom onto the floor to see if it was going to smash and everything. And once it happened, of course, I would use windshields that were imperfect. I wouldn't use brand new ones. And that's how we kind of developed that and used that corrugated material to stop those damages. But those are the type of things that we did. There was the heat problems where I had a customer that shipped neoprene rubber boots that were very, very light and susceptible to some heat. So if there wasn't proper ventilation, literally the boots would get deformed and everything. Sat down with the customer and brought in a packaging engineering and put holes in the boxes to vent, stopped it right then and there. So, I mean, those are like the value add things that you have to bring to the table when you're doing business with clients. You've got to think, like John said, not just think outside the box, but get out of that bowl syndrome, hang by one finger on the lip and dangle out there and really, really dig into certain things out there to look. I always say this, look at the what if scenarios. If you look at the what if scenarios and they do become present, you're ahead of the curve. You can put the quick fix in because you already thought of that before the customer. The biggest thing is you don't want the customer calling you with a problem. You want to call the customer to let them know there's a problem before they know it. That's what long-term business relationships are. You got to beat them to that phone call. You can't have that happen. So I just threw that out as a couple examples of the value that you have to bring to the table constantly. It's like John said, the evolution of logistics and the way that is changing, you have to do the same thing. You always have to bring new strategies, new value add opportunities to the customer to keep them abreast of the situation and what's going on in the world and the disruptors and what they might possibly run into by giving them their heads up and helping them to look at the what ifs and how are they going to move inventory within their network to keep fulfillment up in order to keep their clients happy. We have clients, the shippers have clients who pay their bills. I always say to everybody out there, it's like, do you know, the biggest question is, John, right? Do you know who signs your check? Oh, yeah,
Right.
the company. I always get paid on a Friday. No, I'm sorry. The customer
It's
is the
customer.
one who puts John Hancock on each and every one of your checks. And that's why they should be the real focus of everything that's going on in your life as a service provider. Once they run out of ink, you're up shit's creek. You know what I mean? So it's like, got to do the right things.
Yeah, and you have to earn your customers every day. Okay, I have to, even my internal customers, I still have to earn them, and you do that, like you said, by staying, keeping your finger on the pulse of that evolution.
Yep.
Watching out for anything that may or may not disrupt your system,
Mm-hmm.
and working with your customer and saying, hey, this headwind's coming and we need to sit down and come up with a solution, or here's what I think. What do you think? So that continuous improvement, it does streamline operations and make things run smoother, but it also helps you earn that customer every day because they know that they're not the only ones looking out for their business. They know you're
Yes.
looking too, and you're willing to partner with them and work with them and solve any of these issues that come up, because issues are going to come and you don't know when, and you don't know how complex they're going to be. And it may take a whole tribe to solve an issue. And,
Absolutely.
if that's the case, then you need partners who are going to say, hey, if I pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, we need to talk about this, we need to try to work through this, and you blow me off,
Not good.
then I'm not going to call you anymore, because I'm going to work with the people who work with me. And, being on the shipper side of the house, that's, a lot of shippers just say, oh, well, it is what it is. And I'm not that guy. I believe that, the shipper's got as much responsibility into making that partnership work as the carrier and the broker. And
Yes.
you both should work to resolve issues on either side of the fence to, minimize cost and improve service. And that's, the shipper's got as much skin in the game as the carrier and the broker do.
Yeah. The way that the biggest status, and I've said this for years and decades, is the status that I want is clients for life status. And the reason is, and everybody out there should also have that mindset as well, that it's cheaper to keep a existing client on board than it is to find a replacement.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it also is cost effective for the shipper to have the same mindset as well, because it takes a lot of work for a shipper to find a replacement carrier when you fail. And it's not cost effective. They don't want to do that. They don't want to send out another RFP because it's painstaking. There's no reason for them to do it if you're servicing them appropriately.
Yeah, and just the sheer onboarding and training, because that carrier broker, if they've never moved your product before and there's nuances to your product or your commodity, then they've got to learn that. So it's always harder to train a new person than it is to keep an old one.
Yeah, and that's going to be another topic on our episode, training. But to your point, I just want to touch base. You said something critical about knowing the operation and working with your shippers. It is so pertinent for you guys out there to stay within your vertical and niche that you know well. When you go outside that comfort zone, yes, it's good to be uncomfortable, and everybody should be uncomfortable because that keeps you up on your toes. You will be uncovering your weaknesses
Right.
in front of this shipper. The shipper knows that business very, very well, and he will task you, or she will task you, on many different things to find out whether you can or cannot meet their expectations or exceed them. And once they uncover that, you're done. And it's a waste of a cold call when you reach out to a prospect that's out of your experience, your knowledge base, because the end result's not going to be good. So if you're good at one thing or multiple things, you should stay in there. Sure, it's good to diverse your client base, but before you reach out, you need to gain that knowledge. You need to go out to your network, people who are highly experienced in that area, and don't be afraid to ask. It's not a weakness, guys. It's not a weakness at all.
No,
it just shows that you care. It's okay to go out to a competitor that's a niche. And if they're a decent service provider, they'll be more than happy to say, hey, Jeff, you know something? That's a great question. And here's what we've done. But it's not going to be easy. You know, this is what we did to find all that information out, et cetera, et cetera. It's okay to do that, guys. That's what this industry is all about. It's a freaking $1 trillion industry. I'm sorry, but not one service provider is going to corner the market. It ain't going to happen, all right?
No.
So you get out there, and that's why I do that. That's why I'm part of the Broker Carrier Summit out there, and I share my knowledge and experience, but I also go there to learn. You know, I go there to build those connections for that simple reason. Not that I dabble too far out of my comfort zone, but I do like getting uncomfortable, and I love learning new things every single day, because if you don't learn something new every day, you're going to get lost and you're going to be left behind quickly.
Yeah, and to that point, just to kind of dovetail on that, you know, when I'm bringing on a new carrier or a new broker, and I'm giving them some lanes to quote on, be it an RFP or just here's what we have, I'll flat out tell them on the front end. I said, look, I said, if there is a lane on this sheet or in this system that you're not comfortable with, that's not your bread and butter, tell me. And, we won't put that on you. It's my job to go find, like I said, the right people for the right positions in the right place at the right time for the right cost. And, you're not going to, if you turn down business, that doesn't mean you turn down business for eternity. No, it means you're straight up with me. You're going to shoot me straight. So the next time something else comes across my desk that may be a fit for you, I'm going to call you up and ask you.
It is.
Like you said, there's
right. Brand, image, and reputation's at stake on every single call. You don't want to call up John and that you move steel coils, right? And John moves his material, and it's totally irrelevant. Why are you reaching out to him and wasting his time?
Right.
I have a saying: I don't have time to waste yours. Therefore, if I'm going to call up somebody, they're going to be in my vertical, my niche, because I understand your side of the business, John, because I've worked on that side, and I hate those pitch slapping and all that kind of stuff because we don't have the time in the day to waste with nonsensical freaking calls. It's more bothersome. And as a service provider, when John's at his traffic club meetings and stuff like that, a name may come up, and guess what? John go, oh yeah, you dealt with Sam too? Oh my God, I can't believe, yeah, he called me as well. And your name gets out there for the wrong reasons.
Right.
You don't want that, because it's going to be you're going to carry that throughout your whole career of not knowing your game and trying to dabble into something that you don't belong. Give it to somebody else that knows how to do that, who is experienced, and maybe that other person who's not experienced in that could give you that business. I mean, it's not unheard of. It happens, because the ultimate goal of really ethical brokers out there and non-scumbags is to service their customers in the best way, because it makes the industry better by doing that as a whole.
I agree, 100%.
Yep. So John, we are coming to the end of episode 1. We have so much more to talk about warehousing disruptions. We've only touched a little bit, just a tad, and we need to have a follow up next episode. I'm not sure. Did you see any chats in there?
Bill Robinson reached out, just giving him a shout out. So old dogs that learn new tricks every day. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. And then we got a mystery guest who sent
Mr.
us
Nobody.
who sent us an emoji. I'm not quite sure how to take that, but I'm going to take it as positive, and we can just continue to move on.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do that, John, because I know that we have a lot of platinum nuggets out there. That hey, listen, if our audience wants to take our our experiences and our knowledge and apply it to their business, that's great. If they don't, that's great as well. We're just here to help you maybe uncover things that you never thought of. And if we could just get one individual out of everything that we put into this, and they become very successful, and they tell us, you know what, I listened to your podcast, I implemented that idea, and it changed my whole life, the way I do business. That's why we're doing this. That's why John and I are doing this, for that simple reason.
Yeah, we're just providing the folks out there with a good resource. I mean, you got two guys that's got a lot of experience. We've seen a thing, or we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two, like the insurance company there. I won't name them because they're not a sponsor yet. But
yes. Yeah. So jump on board, guys. And we'll take care of you.
Yeah, we'll take care of you for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's we're just putting a resource out there. This industry is people helping people, and everybody kind of pays it forward, and try to help the next person in line, so that this industry has to continue to operate and to work, and the more efficiently it can do that, then the easier life gets for everybody else. It drives success on all fronts. It's the Together We Rise thing. I believe in that with all my heart.
Yep.
And so, if we can help somebody be more successful, to Jeff's point, if we can help them be more successful with just our little tidbits of knowledge and experience, then he's absolutely right. We've done our job. We want everybody to be more successful in what they do, more successful in their position in their organization, more successful so they can take care of their families and raise their children, and just have a better life overall. And I think that's the ultimate goal for this podcast, is just to bring that resource to the media, so that somebody can get on YouTube or whatever platform you watch your podcast on, and say, hey, I didn't know that. Hey, I didn't know this. Hey, I'm going to try that. That's really the major underlying foundation of this podcast.
I could not agree with you anymore. And I'll tell you what, I want to plug my friends at the Broker Carrier Summit. I am definitely part of that. I definitely support them wholeheartedly. I have just as much passion as the folks on the board there. They got a great event coming up, October 23rd through the 25th. If you have not gone to this event, I highly recommend it. You want to gain knowledge, you want to share knowledge, you want to learn. That's the grassroots event that you should go to. You will not be sold to. You will not see booths. You'll just see incredible professional, non-scumbag participants there that feel the same way as you, that want to share their knowledge and make the industry better than what it is. So go to their website, the Broker Carrier Summit, register that is. And I'll tell you right now, you'll be very happy that you did. So with that said, John, my friend, until our next episode, hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see everybody next time on the Old Dog House Logistics Podcast.